Umang just asked me which IIT I went to. मुझे असदुल्ला खान खालिब के कुछ शब्द याद आ रहे हैं. ये न थी हमारी किस्मत. ये न थी हमारी किस्मत कि IIT जी क्रैक होता. अगर फिर जवान होते यही इंतज़ार होता. कोई मेरे दिल से पूछे तेरे तीरे नी मकस को ये खलिश कहाँ से होती जो IIT जी क्रैक होता. ये न थी हमारी किस्मत. So the IITs are not just a national treasure, they are a global treasure. And all of you IIT grads know that you are the very best of the best. And it is truly a pleasure and an honor to be with you here today. So many of you in the room here are millionaires several times over, and many more of you will get there in the decades ahead. And even with a lavish lifestyle, you are going to end up with very substantial estates. And there are just two choices you have in terms of what happens to that estate. You can either give it to your gene pool, or you could choose to recycle it back to society. My hero, Warren Buffett, has a wonderful quote. I'd like to give my kids enough money for them to do anything they want, but not enough money for them to do nothing. Large inheritances are not really a gift to your children. They are a burden, and they're likely to cause distortions in their lives that in the aggregate are negative. I became interested in philanthropy not because I'm particularly charitable or altruistic by nature. I decided to recycle all of my assets back to society simply because of enlightened self-interest. It is the only sensible choice. And I think if you spend a few minutes thinking about it, you will come to the same conclusion. It is probably okay to give your kids a couple of $1 million each, but I don't think you're doing them any favors by giving them 20 million. Most charities are run by humans with great hearts, but they are all heart and no head. They have never run a business before. They have never met a payroll. They've never had 99% of their net worth tied up in a business teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. I studied the annual reports of many charities and foundations, and I came away deeply disappointed. Not one of them ever highlighted anything that they had failed at, or more importantly, the lessons they might have learned from those failures. They were set up as marketing machines, focused on maximizing inflows by putting forth stories and pictures that tugged at the heart. So I thought to myself, Mohnish, you have all these strange ideas about how a nonprofit should be run, about how there's no difference between running a for-profit business and a nonprofit, about how nonprofits should not be run by humans with tremendous hearts, but businessmen with great hearts, and about how nonprofits ought to narrow their focus to one or two well-defined causes. But all of these thoughts really have no value without execution behind them. So in 2007, when our net worth crossed 50 million, my wife Arina and I decided to set up the Dakshana Foundation. And we decided we'd give away 2% of our net worth every year to the foundation. So that would give us at least $1 million a year, which would allow for meaningful experimentation of putting my strange ideas to a real-world test. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. We had no interest in giving away fish. We wanted to teach fishing. So the question was, what type of fisherman should we try to create? And as I was trying to answer this question, I heard about this amazing person, Anand Kumar, who ran this incredible program called Super 30 in Bihar. Every year, Anand takes in 30 impoverished kids from rural Bihar and coaches them for the IIT entrance exam. His mother cooks all of their meals. Boarding, lodging, coaching, tuitions, everything is free. Super 30 provides all of it. And Anand has been doing this for more than 10 years. And every year, between 80 and 100% of the Super 30 kids get accepted by the IITs. It is a tremendous accomplishment, and it has a social ROI that's simply off the charts. Anand is a mathematician, educator, philanthropist, entrepreneur, all rolled into one. I immediately reached out to him and went to Bihar and met him. And I suggested to him that Dakshana could fund him, and perhaps he could take his Super 30 program to maybe 300 kids a year, from 30 kids a year. He turned me down. He said he did not want outside donor funds. He did not want to scale his program. He liked it exactly the way it was. So I asked him if he would object to us cloning and scaling his program on our own. and he strongly endorsed the idea. And so from a standing start in 2007, Dakshana has sent 458 impoverished kids to the IITs. We took on a total of 1,033 scholars. We had a success rate of 44% versus a national IIT acceptance rate of 2%. And most of our scholars come from rural India. The parents are illiterate. They're usually farmers or laborers. When I visit Dakshana scholar homes deep in rural India, typically the best hotel within a 100-mile radius is a 2-star or 3-star property. My daughter and I have slept in rooms that are mosquito infested during the monsoons. Rooms with no hot water, rooms with dirty toilets. Most of these hotels have no safes. I'm always concerned that we lose our passports. I have to be honest, these things bother me, but they bother me a whole lot less than 7 years ago. It has added an amazing richness to my life, a richness I would find hard to describe, but one I'm not willing to give up, so I keep going back. And the personal journey I'm on is to get to the point where a 1-star hotel doesn't bother me, where lost passports or dirty bathrooms become irrelevant, where I just enjoy the visits. This year, 250 Dakshana scholars just took the IIT entrance exam, and we expect at least 70% of them to be accepted by the IITs. We'll know in a couple of weeks. We have a stretch goal at Dakshana, which is 2020 and 2020 is what we call it. So we'd like to send 2,020 impoverished scholars to the IITs in the year 2020. I don't know if we will get there in 2020 or ever, but if we do, 1 in 7 IITians would be from Dakshana. It's all about the journey. The journey is the destination. I'm reminded of these words by the poet Robert Frost. 2 roads diverged in a wood and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Thank you.
Well, the discussion goes back. Let me ask a question for you, Mohnish. And I'd like you to deal with it at a personal level, because I think people are interested to know what makes you tick and who you are. How did you decide on Dakshana? And in general, how did you decide to not just give money, but also time? Because many people, they figure, hey, I make money. And in India, especially many of us, you make money and you give money to a temple or whatever. But there's a big difference between philanthropy in India versus philanthropy in the West, as many of us who are immigrants here would recognize. And the decision to not just give your money, but also your time is a whole different thing. It's a different thing. And so I'd love to know from you, how did you make that decision? How did you decide on Dakshana, the amount of time you're putting into it, and what is it about you?
I actually never wanted to set up a nonprofit. I think that was never anything I wanted to do. I actually would have preferred to just write checks. And I meet Anand Kumar every year, and I keep blaming him for getting me in the kind of situation I'm in. But yeah, so my sequence of thought was that, like I just said, I have to get to 0 in assets by the time I'm 80. I'm assuming I'm gone at 80. And I do care that the money is used effectively. So I didn't want to just write checks, which may or may not be used effectively. So since I couldn't find a cause that I was passionate about, and I could see some things that I could do on my own, we decided to proceed. I have always assumed that it's much more difficult to give money away effectively than make the money. I think making the money is a lot easier than giving it away. In fact, I'm trying to scale Dakshana now, and it's hard. Our issue is not money. Our issue is getting the government and other entities to move at the pace we'd like them to. I made an assumption that I might spin my wheels for 10 years or 15 years when I try to give money away. I did not want to start when I was in my 70s or 60s. I wanted to start when I was young and I had the energy. So we started when I was 42. And we lucked out. We actually got traction within a few weeks. So that really was a driver, is basically get to 0. That's an important number for me to get to personally be satisfied that I got the absolute highest social ROI I could get with the funds. And then the rest of it is just a game, but it's a fun game.
But if I could just follow up from that, at the end of the day, you made a decision that is unlike many other folks who get to age 40 and make a lot of money, and they still want to make a lot more money, and they keep going. But they don't necessarily decide to do what you did. Was it in your childhood, your parents?
No, it's because I overdosed on Buffett. It did not come from my parents, even though they are very charitable to people around them and so on. But I didn't get any lessons about, trying to do this from my parents, but I did get them from Warren Buffett. And I think most people don't realize they're on a treadmill and they get to 70 or 80 and then I think your choices are very limited in terms of what you can do. And the numbers will get very large for many of you. And if you don't give it thought when you're young and able to do things. And I personally think that business world and people who come from the private sector have a huge amount to add to the world of philanthropy. And so I wish many more of you will take the leap. It's challenging, it's tough, but there are massive paybacks. They're much better than just making more money. It reminds me of a quote by Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger. And Charlie Munger says that Costco has done more good in this world than the Rockefeller Foundation. I think if you pursue entrepreneurship and you build the economy and build jobs, absolutely that has multiple paybacks in terms of helping society. Probably the best way you can help society. I also feel that it's better to keep the two separate in the sense that Costco's mission is not philanthropy. Its mission is to serve its members and such. It does a marvelous job. So to some extent, I feel that I actually see both my lives separate. So there is the capitalist Mohnish, who I spend most of my time on capitalist endeavors, which have really nothing to do with the philanthropic Mohnish and such. And both are fine. And in fact, I would say the capitalist engine is very important because that's the one driving everything else. I think the best thing you can do is pursue entrepreneurship. I only think that philanthropy kind of becomes important and interesting because you're going to end up, if we lived forever, it wouldn't be an issue. But we don't live forever.
But it has never escaped me. And when I recently sold my last company, Keynote Systems, I kept coming back to the central question. Can you, in fact, build a business which makes money, but also does good? And I'd like to probe that, if I could, for all of you gentlemen, because all of you have made money. And all of you can absolutely argue that you have done good by giving employment. And that is, by definition, what a business does. But beyond the giving employment question, can you build a business where the focus is not just making money, it is making money, but also some element of social redemption, social good? You said they should be separate. Why do you say that?
I would say, recalibrate that a little bit. Yeah, I definitely think that the two should be separate, but I think a business created with the primary objective of making money is a very myopic view of a business. In fact, I think that those types of businesses are not sustainable, won't do well long term. So I definitely think you need core principles that are very much core to the DNA of a business. And there's no conflict between having core principles and making money. In fact, if those principles are generally good for the ecosystem, then by definition, the business is going to do well. And if you again go back to an example of a company like Costco, Costco has a rule that they will not make a gross margin of more than 15% on any product they sell. They could tomorrow change those gross margins to more than 20 or 25%, and the business will continue to do well. It would probably do, much more to the bottom line. But in the long run, it would hurt them because it would violate the trust between them and the members. And so I think when you create businesses which are at the core, got great principles for the ecosystem, the byproduct is that it'll make a lot of money. But I think if you try to create a business where the primary and sole objective is to maximize money and not look at well-being of employees or well-being of clients, then long-term those businesses don't do so well.
Right. How do you select students and any specific part of India or are you throughout India?
We sent a girl from the Andaman Islands to IIT. We have kids from Kargil district in Kashmir. We have kids from the southernmost tip of India. We've got kids from Arunachal Pradesh, everywhere. And the secret sauce of what makes Dakshana work, and I lucked out actually, is the government of India has an amazing set of schools that nobody's heard of called the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas. And I think this was the crowning achievement of Rajiv Gandhi, but I don't think most people understand that. So Rajiv Gandhi wanted to replicate Doon School for the rural village kids of India. That vision came to a reality. There are 600 Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas. These are residential boarding schools run by the government of India, one in every district, in every state of India and every union territory. And the schools go from 6th standard to 12th standard, and they are English medium. But when the kids enter the school, most of them do not speak English or Hindi. And like the IITs, the government runs a entrance exam in 5th standard across India. I think more than 10,000 test centers. in 20 languages. 2 million kids a year now take that language independent IQ test. And the top 2% of those kids get selected to go to the JNV schools. So each district has a school and each school takes 80 kids. So you might have a district like Jaipur, for example, where 5,000 kids might apply for the 80 slots. And what Dakshana does, we have a MOU with the government of India, where after these kids finish 10th standard, it's amazing. I get a spreadsheet in Irvine, California from the government, which is one of those 8 locations. And then they spend 2 years there preparing for the 11th and 12th CBSE exam, but also for the IIT entrance exam. And then we set up IIT. So we've got about 3,000 crores a year being spent by the government of India. God bless the government of India on the JNV system. The government spends probably another 3,000 or 4,000 crores on the IITs, which is also wonderful. And we have this very thin layer of Dakshana in the middle, which is under 5 crores. And that 5 crores only works because there's 6,000 crores or 7,000 crores sitting above and below it. So life is great. One of the things that kind of pissed me off before I started Dakshana is that I'd go and read the annual report of like the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, or the Ford Foundation, or the Rockefeller Foundation. And what the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur, I'm naming these, but you could replace the names with any of them that you want to. They're required by law to give away 5% of assets to maintain nonprofit status. They give away like 5.2%. And the second is, specifically, let's say John D. Catherine MacArthur Foundation, the degree of sprinkling is incredible. You might know the MacArthur Fellows and so on. They've got at least 300 different programs that 5% gets sprinkled over. And nowhere in their annual reports did I ever read anything about a comparison between the social ROI differences between these programs, ever. No comparison done ever. So I would think that if you have 5 programs, you would compare them, pick the best 4 for the year after, and then the year after that from 4, pick 3, and just keep narrowing to the ones that really get you there. And the 5% being given away basically is designed so that the people running the foundation have jobs forever. They can never be out of a job because it's 5% of whatever is left in the pie. And they just try really hard to make sure that the pie keeps growing. And which is why actually I commend Bill Gates, because he and Melinda have mandated that 50 years after they're gone, the Gates Foundation has to go to zero. And Warren Buffett has mandated that after all his money goes to the Gates Foundation, when he dies, in 10 years, they have to spend it all. And both these foundations did this because they saw the abuse. If Henry Ford came back today, looked at what Ford Foundation does, he would just be flabbergasted. That is not what Henry Ford is all about. And so I think when philanthropies get started by entrepreneurs, they have a certain direction. But then subsequently, when you get professional managers in, and especially when you don't have any covenants on those managers, you get the results that we see in philanthropy today. And I think the logic that Bill and Melinda Gates used in the 50 years is their perspective was there will be other Bills and Melindas who will have created fortunes in the future and who will identify problems that Bill and Melinda cannot even conceive of today. So their perspective was that whatever they are able to do, they want to do the good for the good of humanity. Let the next generation carry the torch from there, and the next generation probably be smarter because they've got the history. So I think, yeah, if you set a 50-year sunset, that's a really good idea. I also think that foundations run by entrepreneurs is really exceptional. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, there's no difference. I think they're still a public charity, but they're a private charity. But I think there's no difference between that and the Ford Foundation in terms of how it's been run. The difference is you are an entrepreneur who cares a lot about how the money is spent. Whereas at the MacArthur Foundation, they care a lot about whether they have a job next year. That's the driver. And so the sprinkling continues. So if there were another law which said that you couldn't give to more than 5 or 10 causes, that would go a long ways. But my take is the best thing that entrepreneurs and wealthy individuals can do is, number one, try to do most of the giving while they're alive and try to establish some sunsets so it doesn't continue forever. One of the good things about capitalism and entrepreneurs, there's a feedback loop. So if you go down a path where it's not profitable, in the end, you're going to crash. And in the end, the business is not going to exist. So basically, there's a feedback loop in capitalism, which keeps you on a straight and narrow path. Basically, if you're not delivering value to your customers, in the end, you're out of business. That feedback loop does not exist in philanthropy. I mean, if you got like the John and Catherine MacArthur Foundation, large pot of money, and you keep giving away 5% a year and your investment returns are more than 5% a year, it really doesn't matter what's happening. You can go forever. So there's a critical difference between entrepreneurship and philanthropy from that point of view, where philanthropy does not have these market-driven signals. So when an entrepreneur runs a business, he has an idea in his head, goes out with the idea. 99% of the time, that idea is wrong. Maybe 30% wrong, maybe 20% wrong. He has to make changes. And he's continuously making changes, zigging and zagging till he finds the path. And even then, he keeps kind of making changes. In philanthropy, you don't have those natural feedback loops coming back. So for example, what I did in Dakshana is I inverted the problem. And the inversion of the problem was that I was only going to go into areas where there was a feedback loop. So I eliminated everything in terms of giving where there was no feedback loop. I wanted a feedback loop just like an entrepreneur has. And for us at Dakshana, the feedback loop is selections of IIT, percentage of our kids getting accepted into IITs and NITs. Every year we get a data point from the IITs. We don't control that, they control it. And that number goes up and down. And we as a team, the entire management team looks at the numbers, looks at the data, analyzes it, tries to figure out what we need to change and then adjust to it. And I wanted to make sure that's the case. So it's not possible to do that in many parts of philanthropy. And many parts of philanthropy deserve funding, even though there's no feedback loop. But I think it's useful if the heads of philanthropic organizations understand that the feedback loops are important and try to set up some way to get that artificially created so it becomes just like an entrepreneurial engine.